Donald Trump leaned into the mic with that familiar smug tilt of the chin, eyes narrowed, voice low and deliberate. Barack Obama, he said, pausing as if teeing up for the punch, was probably one of the dumbest presidents we've ever had in this country. The air snapped. There was a half-second of silence too short to register, too long to ignore. Then came the collective gasp, not just from the studio audience, but from the panelists, producers, and even the usually unflinching camera operators. It was the kind of moment that makes networks scramble for damage control, but it was already too late. The words had landed. Sharp, calculated, meant to wound. One panelist blinked hard. Another mouthed, "Did he just?" off camera. The moderator instinctively shuffled papers, looking for a script that no longer mattered. Somewhere backstage, someone swore under their breath. America was watching. And Trump knew it. He leaned back, satisfied, flashing that smirk he wears when he thinks he's won. But the camera didn't stay on him. It cut suddenly, purposefully to the far end of the table. Jasmine Crockett, still, poised, expression unreadable. She hadn't flinched when he spoke. She didn't join the chorus of gasps. She just waited, hands folded, watching. Now she shifted. Not much, just enough to draw the eye. She leaned in slightly, elbows on the table, fingers laced. Her gaze never left Trump. And in that gaze was no shock, no fear, just an eerie, deliberate calm. You could hear a pin drop. The panel turned toward her as if pulled by gravity. She opened her mouth slowly. Her voice came low and clear. "No, Mr. Trump. What's dumb is thinking you can erase a legacy just because it makes you feel small." The silence deepened. Even Trump blinked, because everyone had been bracing for outrage. What they got was precision. But no one expected who would speak up next, or how hard she'd hit back. It didn't come out of nowhere. For weeks, Trump had been making his rounds. Cable shows, right-wing podcasts, campaign rallies filled with red hats and rage. But this time, there was a sharpened edge to his usual chaos. A strategy, barely veiled beneath the bluster. He wasn't just running for president again. He was rewriting the past. And that meant one thing: dismantling Obama. In every interview, he found a way to bring him up. Not Biden, not Harris, Obama. As if the former president were still in office. As if he were still the man to beat. It wasn't a coincidence. It was obsession. At a town hall in Iowa, Trump smirked as he mocked Obama's name, stretching the syllables like a schoolyard taunt. On a podcast 2 days later, he implied that Obama had set race relations back 50 years. At a fundraiser, he claimed that under Obama, nobody respected America. Each line was bait, and the media bit every time. Headlines screamed. Clips went viral. Commentators debated the undebatable. But it wasn't just rhetoric. For millions watching, it felt like something deeper, something uglier. Because Barack Obama didn't just serve as president. He became a symbol of possibility, of intelligence, of dignity under pressure, of what it meant to rise, without apology, as a black man in America and still hold the nation's highest office with grace. And Trump? Trump had spent years trying to tear that down. From the birther conspiracy to calling African nations shthole countries, to now calling Obama dumb on live TV, Trump's attacks were never just about policy. They were personal, racial, designed to chip away at what Obama represented for millions, that the system, for once, had bent toward justice. To call Obama dumb wasn't a gaffe. It was a dog whistle, blown in broad daylight. And the timing couldn't have been more calculated. Polls were shifting. Young voters, especially voters of color, were growing disillusioned. Trump's team knew that stoking the fire of resentment, making Obama the target again, would energize his base and distract from indictments, scandals, and the mounting weight of truth. But they underestimated something, because while Trump was busy mocking legacies, America was listening. And for many, especially immigrants, young black professionals, and children who had once watched Obama's inauguration from classrooms and community centers, the insult cut deep, social media lit up with fury. Hashtags swirled, memes flew. But what the cameras caught next wasn't digital, it was human. In that studio, as Trump reclined, smug and certain he'd stirred the pot just enough to dominate another news cycle, he didn't notice the tide turning. He didn't see the slow, deliberate fire building in Jasmine Crockett's eyes. He didn't see what was coming, because while Trump thought he had the final word, the real storm was about to begin. For Donald Trump, belittling others isn't a tactic, it's instinct. Long before he stepped onto the political stage, his brand was built on domination, on cutting people down, on pretending to be the smartest man in the room, even when the facts and the history said otherwise. From reality TV boardrooms to presidential debate stages, Trump perfected a performance that blurred arrogance with confidence. But behind the insults and nicknames, there was always a pattern, and nowhere was that pattern more glaring than in how he treated black leaders. Start with Barack Obama, the man Trump couldn't stop obsessing over, the man whose very presence in the Oval Office shattered centuries of precedent and privilege, the man Trump accused falsely, loudly, and relentlessly of not being born in the United States. The birther conspiracy wasn't just political strategy. It was coded racism weaponized to delegitimize the nation's first black president. Even when Obama publicly humiliated Trump at the 2011 White House Correspondents' Dinner, Trump couldn't let it go. That night, they say, planted the seed of Trump's future campaign, not because of policy, but because his ego was bruised, and that bruise never healed. Over the years, he attacked Congressman John Lewis, a civil rights icon, calling his district crime-infested. He called Maxine Waters a very low IQ person. He mocked Don Lemon and LeBron James, claiming they weren't smart enough to understand politics. He questioned the intelligence of Frederick Douglass, a man who had been dead for over a century. The insult was always the same: dumb, low IQ, unintelligent. It was never about evidence. It was about dominance, about reminding audiences, both his and America's, who he thought belonged at the top and who he didn't. And yet the contradictions were glaring. This was a man who bragged about his grades at Wharton but refused to release transcripts. A man who claimed to be a very stable genius, but couldn't name basic constitutional amendments. A president who skipped briefings, ignored science, mocked experts, and once suggested injecting bleach as a cure. This was a man who mocked Gold Star families, mispronounced names of global leaders, and proudly admitted to not reading books. But somehow to Trump, the problem was always someone else's intellect. This wasn't confidence. This was insecurity wrapped in bluster. It was performative, a mask worn to hide the fact that deep down, Trump seemed terrified of what he didn't understand, of people who earned their respect instead of inheriting it, of leaders who rose not through wealth, but through service and sacrifice. And Obama embodied all of that. He was everything Trump wasn't: disciplined, articulate, deeply read. A man whose calm unnerved Trump more than any attack. And that, more than politics, drove Trump's fixation. Because every time Obama entered a room, Trump felt smaller. So Trump lashed out again and again, trying to reduce Obama's legacy to a punchline. To Obamacare, to tan suits, to birth certificates. Anything but what it truly was: a cultural and political milestone that reshaped what power in America could look like. That's why calling Obama dumb wasn't just a throwaway insult. It was the culmination of years of projection, pettiness, and deeply rooted fear. Trump wasn't attacking Obama's presidency. He was trying to erase the idea that someone like Obama, someone with dignity, depth, and difference, could have ever risen that far. But what Trump didn't expect was resistance. Real resistance. Not the pundits who danced around his words. Not the journalists who asked polite follow-ups. Not the advisors who whispered concerns off the record. He was about to face someone who didn't flinch. Someone who wouldn't let arrogance go unanswered. Someone who would meet him not with volume, but with vision. Because he'd soon meet a voice he couldn't laugh off. A voice that didn't flinch. Before the lights, before the cameras, before the thunderclap of a viral takedown, there was a young black woman in East Texas with a law degree, a spine of steel, and a voice that refused to be quiet. Jasmine Crockett didn't start in politics. She started in the trenches as a public defender, working cases nobody wanted, representing clients who had already been judged before they ever stood trial. She didn't chase headlines, she chased justice, and she saw the system for what it was. The missed phone calls, the over-policed neighborhoods, the kids who grew up, thinking a courtroom was just part of life. Crockett didn't flinch. She fought. She stood in front of judges who tried to talk over her and prosecutors who rolled their eyes, and she made them listen. When police brutality cases began flooding, the headlines, Crockett wasn't just tweeting hashtags. She was in court, in meetings, in streets, pushing back against a system built to silence voices like hers. She represented protesters, spoke at vigils, filed motions that held power accountable. And slowly, her name began to rise. Not because she played the game, because she didn't. Her voice was sharp, her words deliberate, her tone unapologetic. It wasn't long before community leaders started asking, why isn't she running for office? In 2020, Jasmine Crockett ran for the Texas House. It wasn't glamorous. She was outspent, underestimated, challenged by political insiders who didn't like her edge. But she walked the blocks, knocked the doors, looked voters in the eye and told them exactly who she was and what she wasn't. She won, and when she got to Austin, she didn't wait her turn. She became a thorn in the side of the establishment Republican and Democrat alike, challenging voter suppression, calling out hypocrisy, and standing firm even when others caved. Then came 2022. A congressional seat opened in Texas's 30th district, a district rooted in black pride and political legacy. Some said she was too bold, too new, too loud. She won again in a landslide. And from the moment Jasmine Crockett entered Congress, she made one thing clear. She wasn't there to play defense. She came with purpose. Her first year was a blur of committee hearings, fiery speeches, and viral moments. She called out performative politics. She eviscerated witnesses who dodged questions. She stared down talking heads with nothing but facts, and fire clips of her questioning corporate executives started racking up millions of views. She didn't scream. She didn't fold. She spoke the truth with the kind of clarity that left anchors speechless and Twitter timelines ablaze. But what made Jasmine different wasn't just her eloquence. It was her energy. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had already been underestimated her entire life and refused to be underestimated again. She didn't just walk into rooms. She changed the temperature. Young people saw themselves in her. Black women nodded in recognition. Immigrants admired her poise. Even opponents in private admitted, she's sharp. And through it all, she stayed grounded. No fancy language, no empty platitudes. Just a deep, unshakable belief in justice and the right to speak, even when others wish you wouldn't. So when Jasmine Crockett walked onto that live panel, she wasn't a pundit. She wasn't a placeholder. She was the culmination of every courtroom battle, every door she knocked, every protest she marched. And when Donald Trump opened his mouth and dragged Barack Obama's name through the dirt, when he called one of America's most intelligent and dignified leaders dumb, Jasmine didn't explode. She inhaled. She waited because she knew what was coming next would matter. And on that day on live TV she would deliver her boldest moment yet. The studio. Lights were relentless bright, clinical, exposing every twitch, every blink. The moderator had barely recovered from Trump's jab when Jasmine Crockett leaned forward again. "Excuse me," she said, voice level, tone sharp enough to slice through the haze. "But I won't sit here while you rewrite history in real time." Trump turned toward her slowly, smirking. "Here we go," he muttered, eyes rolling like a man too bored to be challenged. Crockett didn't flinch. "You call President Obama dumb," she said, emphasizing the word with a touch of venom. "But under his leadership, this country clawed its way out of the worst financial disaster since the Great Depression. Unemployment dropped, markets stabilized, global allies respected us again." Meanwhile, Trump cut in, waving his hand dismissively. "Spare me the speech. We lost power. We lost jobs. He left the military weak. He left our borders wide open." "That's false," she fired back. No hesitation. Under Obama, job creation was consistent for 75 straight months. Compare that to your term, where I built the strongest economy this country has ever seen, he interrupted again, louder now. "Until China gave us the plague. Don't twist facts." She leaned in further. "I'm not twisting anything. I'm reading data, real numbers, from your own administration's reports." The moderator tried to interject, but the energy had shifted. The room was watching something unfold, not a debate, but a dissection. Trump chuckled under his breath, leaning back in his chair like a king bored with the peasantry. "You're just another angry liberal with a loud voice and no clue how the world works." Jasmine's eyes narrowed. "Not angry. Focused." "Angry?" she said, lifting a brow. "You think I'm angry because I'm not smiling while you insult the legacy of a man who inspired an entire generation to believe they belonged in this country? That's not anger. That's accountability." A beat passed. Even the crew stopped, moving. Trump shifted uncomfortably, forcing a laugh. "Obama was all talk, just speeches, no action." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. And yet, even at his most composed, even with every word carefully chosen, he still managed to terrify you. Trump's smile cracked. Just slightly. Crockett wasn't done. "Because what scares you isn't policy. It's presence, intelligence, leadership that doesn't need to shout. A black man who didn't bow, didn't break, and didn't need to insult others to feel tall." The tension spiked. Trump reached for a retort, but nothing came fast enough. And then she dropped the line that would make headlines for days. She didn't rush it. Jasmine Crockett sat still for a heartbeat longer, eyes locked on Trump's. You could feel the air pull tight, the kind of silence that lives just before thunder. "Let's talk facts," she began, her tone even, calm. "Dangerous. You like to paint yourself as a genius, a builder, a leader. But let's unpack that, shall we?" Trump scoffed, reaching for a cup of water. His hand hesitated mid-air. "You inherited millions and went bankrupt 6 times. "Not once." 6. A few gasps rippled through the studio. "You've called yourself the best deal-maker, the greatest businessman. But even your casino, a business, designed to make money, failed under your leadership." Trump's mouth opened, then closed. He turned toward the moderator, as if expecting a save that never came. Crockett continued. "You've mocked Barack Obama's intelligence, but under his leadership, America recovered from a recession, passed healthcare reform, re-established global alliances, and left office with dignity and popularity that you've never even approached." Trump shifted in his seat. "You call him weak. But he never needed to hide in a bunker during protests. He never urged an angry mob to storm the Capitol. He never lied about losing an election just to soothe his ego." Live chat feeds were already going wild. Comments flooded in. "She's cooking him alive." This is the takedown I didn't know I needed. Crockett, 2028? You say Obama was dumb. But let's remember, he beat you twice. Once in the court of public opinion, once by proxy. And both times, you couldn't handle it. Trump sat up, eyebrows raised in disbelief. Excuse me, I never ran against, but she cut him off. Oh, you ran. Not on paper, but in your mind. From the moment he mocked you in 2011, you've been running against him. Every speech, every insult, every desperate attempt to erase his legacy, that's your campaign. Not for America. For your ego, the audience murmured. Phones were lifted, recording, streaming, immortalizing. You lied about his birthplace. You questioned his legitimacy. You tried to unmake a presidency built on grace and intellect because it made you feel small. Crockett's voice didn't rise. But her words slammed like gavel strikes. And still, he never once called you stupid. He never lowered himself to that level. She leaned forward, eyes locked. So if Obama was dumb, then what does that make the man who couldn't beat him twice? The room exploded. Gasps, scattered applause, even a whistle from off-camera. Trump blinked hard, blinking again. He opened his mouth, then smiled awkwardly, as if trying to pretend he hadn't just been verbally set on fire. Twitter caught fire within seconds. Crockett just body-bagged Trump on live TV. This is how you handle bullies' receipts, poise, and one perfect punchline. Bookmark this moment. She ended him. Even other panelists sat stunned. The moderator exhaled audibly, lips parted, unsure whether to step in or let history finish writing itself. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She just sat back, quiet again, composed. The storm passed, the air charged. Trump tried to speak. That's not listen, Obama failed America, okay? He wasn't a success. I brought strength, but it was too late. The crowd wasn't listening. The clip was already flying across the internet, being edited, captioned, subtitled in 10 languages. Gen Z had it on TikTok. Boomers had it on Facebook. CNN queued it up for the top of the hour. Fox News scrambled to reframe it. And still, Crockett said nothing more. Because she didn't need to. The silence after a knockout always sounds the same. The collective breath of a crowd realizing they've just witnessed a shift. A shift in narrative. A shift in power. A shift in the story America tells about who gets to speak and who gets to be heard. Trump looked over at her, not angry, not smug, just blank, like a man who suddenly remembered the sound of a crowd not clapping for him. And still, Crockett sat silent. It wasn't gloating. It was grace. But it wasn't just a viral moment. It became a political earthquake. The moment hit the airwaves like a lightning strike. Before the segment even ended, the clip of Jasmine Crockett's takedown was already racing through Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok like wildfire. The phrase crisp, clean, devastating was replayed on loop. If Obama was dumb, then what does that make the man who couldn't beat him twice? It was surgical. And America noticed. By midnight, Crockett Clapback was trending #1 nationwide. Right behind it? Obama was right. TikTok creators added beats behind her words, turning the speech into a remix. Edits spliced her calm delivery over footage of Trump looking increasingly flustered. On Instagram, fashion bloggers were already quoting her on carousel posts, pairing her words with images of Crockett mid-delivery, braids sharp, eyes locked. One tweet, with over 500K likes in a matter of hours, read, "We just witnessed the political equivalent of a dunk from the free throw line. Late-night hosts didn't. Waste a second." Jimmy Kimmel called it, "The roast Trump didn't see coming." Trevor Noah played the clip in full twice. Even Stephen Colbert broke script. That wasn't a rebuttal. That was a reckoning. The studio panelists, once stiff and stunned, scrambled for commentary. One analyst on MSNBC shook his head in disbelief and said, "That was more than a viral moment. That was generational." Even CNN, often cautious in tone, labeled the clip a defining moment in the political conversation of 2025. Meanwhile, Crockett's donation page buried on her campaign site started getting flooded. By morning, small-dollar contributions were pouring in from across the country, from Chicago to San Diego, from first-gen immigrants to retirees. People left notes. "Thank you for saying what we felt for years. This is why we fight." Dignity just punched back. She appeared on Morning Joe by 9 a.m., still calm, still poised. When asked if she planned her remarks, she just smiled and said, "No, I just got tired of watching history be disrespected." The clip aired again. Republicans tried to spin it. One strategist tweeted, "Crockett's tone was divisive. She should apologize." But within minutes, that tweet was ratioed into oblivion, buried under memes and clapbacks from every corner of the internet. Even some conservatives broke ranks. A former GOP congressman tweeted, "Disagree with her politics, but that was a masterclass in composure under fire." Trump's team issued a statement the next day, vague and awkward, calling his Obama remarks taken out of context. The statement ended with, "President Trump continues to stand by his commitment to restoring American greatness." But no one was talking about the statement. They were talking about the moment. In barbershops and college campuses. In comment sections and community centers. People weren't just quoting Crockett, they were feeling her. She had said what so many had wanted to scream for years, but instead of screaming, she'd done it with fire and elegance. And then came the think pieces. The Atlantic called her the new face of unapologetic leadership. Teen Vogue dubbed her a Gen Z icon. The Root published a headline that read simply, "Jasmine did that." Within a week, Crockett was invited to The View, The Breakfast Club, and even Pod Save America. Her schedule filled up, her name lit up search trends, and her voice. It rang louder than ever. But this wasn't just about going viral. This was about reclaiming the narrative. For years, people had watched Trump steamroll interviews, dominate segments, and spew insult after insult with barely a pause. But now, for once, someone had stared him down without theatrics, without fear, and won. It felt like a shift, a cultural pivot. One that reminded the country, intelligence doesn't need to yell, and dignity, when paired with courage, can still win the room. And Jasmine wasn't done. Her closing words would echo across generations. The storm had passed, but the air was still electric. As the segment wound down, the moderator turned to Jasmine Crockett one last time. "Congresswoman," he said, his voice steadier now, "you've made waves tonight. Any final thoughts?" She didn't rush. She looked into the camera, not at the host, not at Trump, but directly at the millions watching from living rooms, phones, classrooms, break rooms. "This moment," she began, "isn't about Donald Trump, and it isn't even about Barack Obama." A pause, just long enough for the weight to settle. "It's about the country we want to be." Trump shifted slightly beside her, but she didn't flinch. "We can spend our time rehashing insults, calling names, weaponizing identity and ignorance. Or we can decide that our politics deserve more than performance, more than division, more than the constant tearing down of people who dared to lead with compassion and vision." The moderator said nothing. No one dared interrupt. "I didn't come here to debate insults," Crockett continued. "I came here to defend dignity. Not just Obama's, not just mine, but the dignity of every person who's ever been told they don't belong in the room, who's been underestimated because of where they come from, because of the color of their skin, because they didn't inherit power, they earned it." She took a breath. "I think about the immigrant who learned English watching President Obama speak, the student who decided to study law because they saw someone who looked like them in the White House, the teacher in El Paso, the nurse in Detroit, The young black girl in Tulsa who watched her mother cry the night Obama won. Her voice softened, but her presence filled the studio. We are not a perfect country, but we are a country that has always moved forward not by mocking intelligence, but by uplifting it. Not by tearing people down, but by building something better. She turned slightly, finally glancing toward Trump. Mr. Trump, you can insult and deflect all you want, but the truth doesn't need applause to be true. And greatness, real greatness, isn't loud. It's steady. It's earned. And it inspires, not intimidates. Another pause. Then she faced the camera again. If you're watching this and wondering whether your voice matters, it does. Whether your story counts, it does. And if you're tired of watching the same tired show, where anger wins ratings and cruelty passes as strength, then join me in writing something new. The studio was still. Even Trump sat in silence. And then she smiled, not with smugness, but with resolve. Dignity isn't weakness. It's our only way forward. And as the credits rolled, one thing was clear. The game had changed. One insult. That's all it took to spark a moment that America won't soon forget. Donald Trump thought calling Barack Obama dumb would dominate another news cycle, would score him another round of headlines, laughs, attention. But what he got instead was Jasmine Crockett. Calm, composed, unshakable. She didn't yell. She didn't stoop. She dismantled his rhetoric with truth, reminded the nation of what leadership looks like, and drew a line in the sand between performance and purpose. In 7 minutes, she reframed the conversation not just about Trump or Obama, but about who we are and who we still have a chance to become. That's why this moment matters, because it wasn't just a clapback. It was a call forward, a reminder that courage still speaks, that facts still matter, that dignity, even in a world addicted to outrage, still cuts through the noise. And now it's your turn. If you believe intelligence isn't a liability, if you believe public service deserves respect, if you believe the next generation deserves leaders who inspire, not incite, then share this. Subscribe. Add your voice to a growing movement that says, enough is enough, that says the era of arrogance, division, and spectacle has had its run. Let's amplify the voices that speak truth. Let's hold space for grace under fire. And let's remind this country that dignity always wins in the end.